corruption corruption sort of bleeds into this or seeps into it, and very subtly, and that's a big problem. Corruption, generally speaking, just giving of bribes, is something rightly vilified, but when the bribes are called grants, are called scholarships, are called donations, are called prizes and awards, and it's accompanied with a trophy, suddenly it doesn't look so much like a bribe. Yet, in all intents and purposes, it is. And this creates a deep problem. Even the whole carbon sequestration and carbon trading business, it is money changing hands, but there is no goods or services in return for that money. That's defined as money laundering. That's money laundering. But we've given it a name, carbon credits, and we call it, we even say biodiversity credits. It is corruption. The whole system is corruption. There is no part of carbon credits that is a legal, above board commercial transaction. It is money laundering, it is corruption, and sadly, it is corruption that has engaged the UN, it has engaged governments, it has engaged community leaders, the corporate world, etc. And it's going to be a very hard nut to break. But fortunately, there have been some cracks in it. Sometime last year, the EU Parliament voted not to accept environmental standards from companies that are based on carbon credits. Companies actually have to show how they are reducing emissions, not saying that we've planted X number of trees in Kenya. And I think the important thing for the world to know is that environment doesn't work like that. If you mess up a river in Germany, planting trees in Kenya does not clean up that river in Germany. Simple as that, yeah. The crisis narrative is something that was brought up when as an extension of colonialism, as they sought to stretch out colonialism through conservation. So this narrative was that, if I'm talking about Africa, it says all African wildlife is in peril. That's the first part of the paradigm. The source of this peril is black people. So those two statements, it's sort of the precursors to all genocides we've known of in history. You othering. Suddenly these black people are others in their own homeland. Some of them are even referred to as minorities. I've had occasion to ask someone, how are you referring to Maasais as minorities in Maasai land? Like, that's their home. How are they minorities? It's Maasai land. And this then extends, the crisis narrative then justifies violations of rights. It justifies violence. We need to shoot these people because the elephants are disappearing. We need to shoot them because they're going to kill the rhinos. And this has played out. You can see how this plays out in that we have a lot of translocation of rhinos by various organizations, particularly African parks, across various vast distances in Africa. A rhino, as I've said before, is the most powerful land grabbing tool you have in Africa. If you can acquire a rhino, you get a license to fly it across international borders, place it somewhere, and you get free land, thousands of acres to keep the rhino. You get a license to fence that land and remove people, and you get a firearms license and a license to shoot anyone you see in there. As African parks moved a few rhinos from South Africa to Chad some years ago, they've all died. Not one survived, but African parks still owns the land where they were placed. So that's how it works. And the crisis narrative makes it all okay. This is probably one of the biggest scams visited on mankind in history, because the UN came up with this harebrained scheme, and it doesn't say if every country has to set aside 30% or if it's 30% as a total. So there's nowhere where it's written that Central Park in Manhattan has to expand by 30%. But we expect Tsavo National Park in Kenya to expand by 30%. No one's going to expand Regent's Park in London by 30%. But people will want to expand Serengeti by 30%. Because logic states that there's biodiversity gains to be made by expanding tropical parks, but not parks in the north and in the west. But this then means the 30 by 30 is patently, inherently unfair to people in the global south, who have actually done an admirable job of keeping our biodiversity, because all the conservation advice is coming to us like from the United States, and this is the country that they hunted bison from 60 million to 100 or less. They hunted the passenger pigeon from 5 billion to 0. And now they're advising us on how to live with wildlife or how to conserve wildlife. So without an instrument like the 30 by 30, they'd have no leg to stand on as they speak to us about wildlife. This is why the 30 by 30 is so important to them. And it's not going to be achieved. I can say that without fear of contradiction. Under the current definition of national parks, we already have so much violence, yet the global average right now is around 12 or 13%. If we doubled that, I'm not sure how many thousands of people we'd have to kill to achieve conservation aims. So the 30 by 30 is, I'm glad 2030 is only 6 years away, so it will be proved nonsense and hopefully will be abandoned after that, and people will try something more logical.